all messed up. Brett McMurphy tweeted this out earlier, Craig. This is the revenue distribution for 21-22 fiscal year from all of the Power 5 conferences. The Big Ten distributed almost $60 million per school. The SEC at almost $50 million. The Big 12, $42 to $44.9 million. The ACC, $38 to $42 million. And the Pac-12 at $37 million. Not as big of a gap between the Big 12 and SEC right now as of a year ago, but now that's all going to change because the SEC's money is nearly going to double from that. And same with the Big Ten's going to go up, not double, but going to go considerably from that. So it's going to be wild to see what happens on the back end of the distribution with the playoff and everything else that's coming up. But there's not as much of a financial gap now between the bottom three in the SEC, but it's about to be cavernous.
Yeah, I mean, it is. And, I think I saw something yesterday. I can't recall who exactly it was from. But, when you are making double what others are making, like, how much of an advantage is it going to give you? Like, is it different making $50 million more than making $30 million more? Like, what does that extra $20 million do?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, do you just buy more players? I mean, because that's basically where a lot of the money's going now. It's not, again, name, image, likeness, really. It's simply just going and grabbing players. Giving them, in some cases, the largest, paydays they'll probably ever see, which is why it's great. It's life-changing, family, generational, altering money in a lot of cases, which I do think needs to always be brought back into focus of why it's such a good thing, and it's not all, negative Nancy like it can sometimes sound or be portrayed on here. I just get frustrated with, like, the lack of rules, the lack of the continuity of it. I'm just somebody who kind of likes things clean and clear-cut, and NIL is anything but that, and I think that's why it just boggles my brain and frustrates me to think about, because it's just sort of all over the place. It's like a Picasso or so. Or is Picasso, who was the one that's just kind of throwing who would be a famous artist? I'm trying to think.
Andy Warhol.
Something like
Jackson Pollock.
It's like a Jackson Pollock, right? Like, that's what, and I'm more of like a Mona Lisa. I know what it is. It's clear cut. It's a woman. Okay, I get that. And NIL's Jackson Pollock.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so it just makes my brain go haywire trying to think about that. But that's something I wonder about is, okay, you're making $90 million and the Big 12's making $45. Okay, that's certainly going to make a huge difference. Or the Pac-12's making whatever, the ACC's making whatever. We know the ACC schools are freaking out, some of them because of that widening gap. But once you get past a certain point, like, really, what does that difference make? And maybe that doesn't even matter, because that $20 million difference is, the $20 million of a difference that is enough of a difference is enough of one that it puts you so far in a different stratosphere that you're hurting. So that other $20 extra million is, like, not even in the picture, really. But I think this is the concern for everybody involved except for those top two, and maybe a little bit less the Big 12 right now than before, of, what do those numbers continue to look like moving forward. And I saw a lot of people latching on of, like, well, just wait until Oklahoma and Texas leave. They're screwed. And it's like, well, you weren't paying attention to the headlines over the last year, because they've kind of counterbalanced that to where everybody's going to be making the same. And that's with the new schools. And you might say, well, it's years later, it should be making more. But you just lost Texas and Oklahoma, so the fact that they can even make as much as they were is the win. Because the whole idea was they were going to lose those teams and then just fall into this cavernous hole of where they're making like $16 million a year and they were going to be the dead last of the Power Five. Instead, they maintained their position despite losing those two. So they kind of break even. And then if you add in the new college football playoff money and all of the other things that Brett Yormark's trying to do, and one thing I didn't see brought up, because there was a particular, like, Pac-12 fan that I saw really just trying to go at it with Big 12 fans over the figure, and I don't think he realized, like, there's also the buyout money that comes into play that counterbalances it. But don't forget, the Pac-12 is going to have to be paying a little bit of money as well for their whole situation that we learned about with the money not going Comcast, where the money wasn't supposed to be going where it was supposed to go. And so we haven't heard, I think, the last of that. So you take that into account as well, and that does deviate the figures a little bit more. So I think you got to be happy if you're the Big 12 that you're, where you expected to be, and maybe even a little bit better off. We're definitely better off than you expected coming off of the Oklahoma and Texas announcement. If you're the ACC, it's very clear as number 4 to see why you're like, what? What is going on? We're 4 out of 5. If you're the Pac-12, I think, you probably thought you were, or the Big 12 maybe were going to be in that spot. But, now you're trying to get into a better spot with these negotiations that have been ongoing for a while. And, nothing else on that today that I saw. Maybe you did. I don't think so. But, we'll see where they land ultimately when that new TV deal gets announced sometime here in the next year or so. But that's interesting to look at, and I think if you're the Big 12, you got to be happy. If you're the ACC, again, very frustrated, and if you're the Pac, you're just wondering what that's going to look like here in the next 5 years or so. But the top 2, I mean, what can you say? They're ahead. They're going to be ahead. They're never going to not be ahead, and I don't see a scenario really where unless the Big 12 or like the ACC, and even with them, that TV deal, man, is just such an albatross for how long it is. But, barring the Big 12 having like K-State, TCU, Baylor, and Tech or something, like go roll off some national championships in football in like a string, which is unlikely. They're probably going to be a distant third at best, and the other 2 would be as well at their very best, and that's just the way it's going to be, and we'll see how much that matters. It's going to matter. It's going to matter in the transfer portal. It's going to matter in NIL. It's going to matter in facilities and things like that. But again, how much really makes a difference at a certain point, you know?
And how much – the other thing is it's not just about how much because, Northwestern is going to get, $80 million a year for this. But But is it going to change their organizational philosophy when it comes to football that much? Why would it? They can be bad and still – they can divert that money other place. Yeah.
Is Rutgers suddenly going to be a far better program than K-State because they're making way more money? I wouldn't put my money on the Scarlet Knights. No.
No, but if you did give a program like K-State $80 million a year, holy cow. Yeah. I mean, where they would spend that money. Their football and basketball in particular would have like second and on facilities. So that is interesting. And it's also why when you mentioned the ACC and their TV deal locked in, that they're trying to do this merit-based thing, because what other way, especially are the big football brands, going to have to keep pace, because they're the ones who've decided to put forth their resources into football. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who are going to. So if you are one of those 7 schools that considers yourself, especially a football-first school that cares about football and is trying to win conference and national titles every single year, not that the other ones aren't, but that is what drives your athletic department completely, because, I mean, it's, depending on who your president is, who your AD is, and what your alumni are, I mean, you're technically always trying, but, some people have to do it Moneyball way and other people can do it big money way. And, UNC and Florida State and Clemson and Miami feel that and those other schools feel they want to, throw some money around, but they can't make more money. There's no way for them to make more money. So that's why they tried to do what they're doing. But even then, it's probably still not going to close the gap in a way that's going to make them feel better and more comfortable for more than a decade.
Probably not. I mean, not in the near future. It's a nice thought. It was a fun thought at the beginning of the week that was, something that perhaps was going to be happening or imminent. I mean, it just felt so heavy, right? On like Monday of like, oh man, something's going to happen. And then, everybody actually reads the contracts, and they apparently did so, multiple occasions, multiple, pairings and groups meeting at different times or talking at different times, and they walked away and were very public here this week about like, there's not really anything to do about it. So, I mean, they're stuck. They know they're stuck. I'm sure they're still finding and trying to find a way to, or fighting and trying to find a way to figure out some loophole that doesn't seem to exist right now that will get them in a better opportunity to perhaps change that, but there's not something on the horizon right now. So that gap continues. I mean, I guess the good thing is like we know that their money is also not changing all that tremendously much in the next few years either, because they're now locked into their new TV deal. So, it's not like every year it's just going to be like another 50 millions added on to where, you look up in 2 years and now it's like 3 times of what it was. But, as the years shave off, like you are also getting closer to your deal. And when both of you come up, whatever arrangement we're talking about here, we know the SEC and Big Ten will get, a large chunk without even having to negotiate for it. And the others will kind of have to state their case a little bit more. And so, we've seen Brett Yormark try to be, a bit of an innovator and a guy who's trying to find money where he can. I'm very curious to know, like, with these basketball tournaments in the preseason or these international games, like, what kind of money is that really adding overall? Like, is it adding like $1 million to everybody's pockets at the end of the year? Is it adding a couple million? Like, where do they see the benefit of that outside of the exposure? Because I don't think that's calculated into things, and I'm not sure it would make a massive difference either way. Like, nobody's making $10 million more as a result of these ideas, but can you get to a point where maybe you are making a few million, and then, 45's 50 or 50's 55, and then you're at least growing your base a little bit more outside of the TV contract, which is fixed for, the foreseeable future.
I mean, with Brett Yormark trying to go international, what he's trying to do, especially with basketball, which is a far more international sport than football is say, okay, we're going to play in Mexico and we're going to try to play some games in Europe, and we're going to make Big 12 college basketball popular there so that we can get international distribution media rights there. So that's more money for that. But that's a long-term play. It's not like they're going to go and play Houston and Kansas and Mexico City in 2024, and then all of a sudden everybody's going to wake up in the morning in Mexico and be a Big 12 fan. I mean, that is a long-term thing that they're trying to do there.
Yeah, that's a long play,
Yeah.
and who knows if he'll even be around to see, most of it. We got to be just realistic about the situation.
He could wind up being the next president of a network.
He could, he could be the president of a franchise in the NBA or something. He could do any number of things, but if you are only looking short term, then that's a mistake as well. So I like the fact that he's thinking both short term and long term. But I'm just curious. It's just kind of a random thought I've had of just like, I wonder how much that's really gonna add, because I think any amount's significant. So if it's a couple $1,000,000 or it's 100,000, I think that's notable in the payoffs. But interesting to see that. I think. Not quite maybe what you thought as far as the top to the middle to the bottom. And really, it's really just kind of a top to a middle, and there's really not as much separation as you would think. But as we know, like, that real separation started to come in these next wave of TV contracts. Not what's already happened, but what's about to happen with the Big Ten and their, combination of networks, and with the SEC, ESPN exclusivity. That's when we'll start to see more of the dividing line there. But, not as bad or extreme as maybe you would think, given how it's talked about, but that's also because we're talking about what's about to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. When we come back.